Hopefully you've had a chance to review them. And if not, and no one raises their hand to speak or mentions anything otherwise, we will take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Should we do a roll call here?
Unfortunately, yes. I'll go.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Commissioner Fox.
Aye.
Commissioner Piney. Or Dennis, do you have your microphone on, Piney?
I think he might be,
Oh, shoot. Look like he just left.
he just,
No,
did
there's
we-
something.
oh, there's Mr. Balsanic, so we can,
Okay. Well, I'll continue with the roll call here, and maybe Dennis will come on as I run through it here. Commissioner Goldbush.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Piney. And Commissioner Balsanic, we're voting on approval of the minutes. If you want to enter in a vote, recommendation for approval. Yes, and President Sullivan.
aye, yes.
Okay.
Next
It's,
motion.
6-0 on the minutes.
All right, fantastic. Next, we will move on to the bills.
All right. I just have a couple bills here. One of them is the reimbursement request for the Confluence for one of the final grant reimbursements. And just as a note on that one, I put in today the last of the reimbursement requests for grants related to that project. So that's a great sign there. And we also have a bill for Fleagle for some general business, and that concludes the bills.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Hinsman related to the bills? Hearing none, we shall have a motion to approve the bills as stated.
Move.
A second.
So Bruce first, and then Ms. Fox, Mr. Gobler's first, and then Ms. Fox second. Is that correct? Okay. I will
Take the roll on the bills here. Commissioner Fox, Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Goldbush,
Aye.
Commissioner Balsanic,
Yes.
and President Sullivan.
Yes.
Did Mr. Piney get released from the meeting again? Oh, there he comes again.
It must be. I had bad connections all day today with court, so I think it might be the general vicinity.
Okay, and Dennis, we're going through a roll call vote on the bills right now with approval on the floor. Do you want to enter in a vote on that? I don't know if he's quite there. I think at this point we have a majority for ayes. I'll leave it at that if that's okay with the president.
I believe we can go ahead and have that as passed.
All right, that sounds good. So we'll move on to the next portion of our meeting, which is a consideration of a preliminary development agreement with Spades SBC. And I'm going to turn this over to Rusty in a moment. Rusty's been working closely with this organization over the past year or so. But just to tee it off here, I know I sent an email out to HEDRA yesterday. We have received another proposal for the property as well. So the purpose of the email was to make HEDRA aware that there is other interest on the property. And with today's action proposed and the presentation from Spades, we have on the agenda that we would be considering entering into a preliminary development agreement, or drafting one up, I should say. And with the nature of a preliminary development agreement, part of that is to provide exclusive to the developer so that they can follow through in making preparations with the understanding that they have some commitment to the property for a period of time. So with the revelation coming up of another interest in the property, HEDRA may wish not to take action on that tonight. HEDRA may wish to hear the presentation from Spades and make a determination that yes, they would like to proceed forward. So that's a decision a little bit different than what we had earlier when the packet was first released on this. So I'll turn it over to Rusty here in a moment, but those are some considerations for you tonight. If you choose not to take action directly on the preliminary development agreement, there's options that we can hear this and the other proposal potentially at the July meeting. So I will turn it over to Rusty, who's going to provide a brief introduction of the Spades group, and then I think we have members from Spades here as well who can provide more information on the company. Thank you.
You're gonna let them in?
I will. Let's see. I've got Bill Keneally, Joy Hazuka, and I've got somebody on web conference.
That'd be Ray Menard.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna put these people in right now, so they should be coming in just a moment. And
Can you give Ray co-host status so he can operate his slides?
you got it. I think he's coming up under the web conference, if that's correct. So I will do that here. And if I can find him, there he is. Okay. All right. Well, folks, welcome to the meeting. I see Ray there. He is Mr. Web Conference. So good. So, Rusty, did you want to provide an introduction?
Yeah, about 12 months ago, I was contacted by Hastings resident Ray Menard to talk about interest of developing the office building for a new startup company called Spades. And the more I learned about it, the more excited I got about what Spades is going to do and what their presence in Hastings might mean, and kind of running in parallel with their efforts to form a management team and do initial fundraising. We reached this point kind of coincidentally where the option on block 1 with Panache disappeared, and their interest in having more serious conversations with us, those 2 points intersected. So we have leadership staff from Spades here tonight to talk to you about who they are and what the organization is going to do, and their interest in making Hastings the headquarters of their operations. So having said that, I will turn it over to Ray.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to speak to you all. It's a wonderful honor. Thank you. I'm a longtime Hastings resident. I lived here as a child, and my parents headed off to Wisconsin for a while. I came back after university, and I live in the geodesic dome house down on the east side of Hastings on First Street. Probably many of you know where that is. I've spent some 40 years in this house almost, and have spent my career in business development, startups, early stage companies, turnarounds, product launches, etc. Actually, several dozen of those around the world. I've worked in Africa and in Europe and all over the United States. But I've stayed in Hastings the whole time, even though I took jobs in California, for example. And so I also have 20-some patents, if that matters to anybody. I feel like I need to express myself on this front because I'm a local boy, and sometimes local boys aren't appreciated very much. But I'm really excited about the opportunity that I'm working on right now. About a year and actually, boy, it's almost 2 years ago now, I was walking through a field in California, and I was working with an agricultural company at the time, Organic Herbs, one of the biggest in the world. And they had hedgerows of trees between the herbs. And the farm manager said to the owner, we should take down these trees because look at the that are close to the trees aren't doing as well. And we could plant more herbs if we didn't have these trees in the way. And boy, I could really improve the productivity of this farm. And the farm owner stopped and smiled and said, yeah, except nothing grew here before there were trees, which is an amazing thing to think about. And it is that weird connection that we see. The trees take a little bit of nutrition from the world, but what they give back is far more. And I left that day and asked myself the question, simple question, stupid question in some ways, given that trees are the most direct, least expensive to mitigate climate change. How come the world's not planting them at massive, massive scale? And I spent some months verifying that question was correct. It is. And then in 2019, in January, I began working on this full time. And I gathered a team to assist me with figuring out why trees aren't being planted at massive scale. They're not. To figure out what scale we're really at. And in January of this year, that study was complete, a business plan was in place, and we began to recruit a bigger team. Two of those team members happen to be with us tonight. Bill Keneally is here. He's our CFO. Joy Izuka is here as well. Joy is an entrepreneur as well, and our head of our HR department. We've begun now to raise funds for this company. That's the stage we're at. We have 10 of us in our team. I'll talk more about them later. But before I go into a presentation about our company, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to take a moment and let each of these team members introduce themselves. Joy, why don't you go first, please?
Okay, good. All right. I'm on my phone and figuring out how to mute and unmute and turn the video. So good evening, everyone. It's great to meet you. So as Ray said, I'm the head of people and culture within Spades. So I come from a few decades with a global consulting firm. Within that firm, I helped to build it, did a lot of startups within the firm, be it geographical startups in Europe or functional startups like R&D within the company overall. And so I am here because I like to do that, to start up a new venture, a new part of a venture, and then to scale that. And of course, we plan to operate globally as well. So having the cultural understanding and being able to work with people in different places and having unifying principles, but also respecting the different ways of doing things is part of how we tend to operate. So happy to be here, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. Joy, go ahead, Bill.
Oh, hi, good evening, and also thanks for having us. I was blessed to start my career with Arthur Andersen, and my first client, believe it or not, is odd to say, is Champion International Paper, which bought St. Regis and it later merged with International Paper, now the largest paper company. So very early on my career, unbeknownst to this, I was at paper mills and timberlands out in the West Coast. That took me through real estate, specifically hospitality. I was blessed to be the worldwide global controller for Intercontinental Hotels. We worked for I was the CFO for a Blackstone entity that distributed ground services for hotels. And most recently, I worked with Carlson Wagonlit Travel in Minnesota, which manages about $23 billion of global travel expenditure. So I was lived and worked in the UK in 2 stints for 12 years with the family. And even recently, oddly, before I met Ray, I had a consulting client who was supported in bank by Premier Bank and the Regan family down in Hastings. I was there before I met Ray. So it's been kind of a fun circle for me. Very excited, attracted to this opportunity, first based on its mission and impact, which my daughter shares deeply. The scale is very, very attractive, and the complexity and the challenge and the international preview of it. And kind of, as Ray said, it's got a hometownness to it, but also an international specter, as Joy mentioned, the diversity and the impact of both in climate and people throughout. Major challenge, and I'm really looking forward to test all my skills, and really appreciate your time today listening to the company, give us an opportunity to possibly headquarter in your town.
Thank you. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do would be to share my screen and do a presentation. I don't know what happens to the video at this stage so that you can see what I've got going. Perhaps you manage that, John, or I'm not sure what.
Yeah, it looks like, Ray, you should have a share screen at the bottom of your monitor. Do you just see that?
I do, and I'm turning that on. And
And you're all set. We see your screen.
Okay. When I expand it like this, how much do you not see?
We see everything. It's a full screen right now.
Okay. Being blocked by pictures too much.
Correct.
So, Spades, that's the name of our organization. And we're all about trees. As we go forward, you'll see what we're doing to try to help the world go to scale. If you paid attention to the news over the last year, you noticed that jungles were on fire around the world, most famously the Amazon jungle. I will be sending this out via Rusty, by the way, so you don't need to take notes. And I have, besides these picture slides, I have a bunch of slides with the data on them intermixed. In this case, I'm going to jump right to the data. Nobody used to believe that jungles could burn. 15 years ago, there was a big debate about whether that was possible. But it turns out it's totally possible. If you look at the bottom left here, in the Amazon, there were 2,100 fires last year. And we didn't think it could even burn before. In the Congo desert in Africa, there were more. There were 10,000 fires. But it wasn't just that. There were a record number of fires in Alaska, 500. Indonesia, their jungles burnt as well, 1 million hectares. 4,000 square miles, if you can imagine that. 300 fires in Siberia. They were the biggest fires in the world. Some 3 million hectares of Siberia burned. Again, nobody thought that could happen. And of course, the fires in Australia were unbelievable this last year. In the bottom right, you can see the picture from space of Australia. You got to understand that Australia is as big as the continental United States. You got to picture the US on fire at that scale to understand what was going on in Australia. It's incredible. So we've seen signs like this of fires, and hurricanes are stronger than ever and more of them. This year we had 3 tropical storms before the hurricane season even started, and desertification is happening around the world. But I want to take you to something that's a little closer to home, and it's crop yields. This is a study that shows the change in crop yields across the planet by 2050. It's kind of shocking. You notice the Midwest, where we are, Minnesota is in the pink zone, which is a drop, say 25% decline in crop yields in Minnesota. The so-called breadbasket of the world is all going to face significant declines. And you can see this around the world as well. Europe is in trouble. Africa and South America and India, these are all places that are already short of food, and their crops are going to decline dramatically. Shockingly, to the north, it's better. Across the Arctic Circle, look at Canada. How far north crops are increasing all across the Scandinavian nations and Russia. We see lots of green. 15 years ago, in 15 years, the Minneapolis climate has become like Des Moines. In another 15 years, we're going to be like St. Louis. Things are shifting. So we can't grow like we could, and it's moving to the north. This is a disaster because that's the gigantic arboreal forests. And if we cut down those trees, we're even in more trouble. The other thing that I want you to notice here is far bottom left corner. This study was published in 2009. It was probably completed and worked on in 2007 and 2008. So as of today, this is an old study. But if you look at it, you'll see that there's a pattern between the fires I just showed you and this study. Australia is on fire. Even in far north Siberia, that big pink area, that was on fire. The jungles were on fire. It's amazing. And I can tell you the green spot on the east coast of Africa, Kenya, record floods, rains in times that used to be dry season. It's bizarre, but this map is coming true far faster than anyone imagined it would. It's kind of shocking. Climate change is real and we're in it. So trees are best at sequestration. Let's talk about that. We need to do 2 things to address climate change. We got to stop putting carbon dioxide in the air, and we got to take out what we put in. So 2 actions. Putting it in, that's why we are so interested in solar power and wind power and all those things. We need to stop burning fossil fuels because it puts an enormous amount of carbon dioxide into the air. It out is much harder, and the best, most direct way to do it is trees. Now shows where trees can be planted in the world. This is a landmark study, and the green areas are areas where there's basically wide open for trees. Yellow is it's a mix. There's already some trees there, but the number could be increased. The magic number is at the bottom. There's space in the world today for 1.2 trillion trees, and that doesn't count any urban or farmland. There's plenty of room out there for trees. Where we're at today at Spades, we have been telling this story around the world, and we have gathered around us the largest coalition, largest in terms of trees planted. These are the most important tree regrowing organizations on the planet. You don't see any names that you recognize because the big name brand environmental organizations actually don't plant that many trees. They talk about it a lot, but they really don't do much. These are the organizations that are getting it done. We have identified there's less than 20 organizations that are planting more than 500,000 trees a year. Our estimate is that a total of about 250 million trees are being regrown every year in the world. We need to be hitting a number of at least 25 billion, 100 times as big. These are the best organizations. They are in a coalition that we have formed, and they are part of our work. We are today already the largest growing organization on the planet. Just kind of an amazing thing to say. So here are some examples of the work they do, and you can see their reach is global, essentially on every continent. I'm going fast because we have limited time with you tonight. The problem, surprisingly, is not money. There's actually plenty of money. We estimate that today there's about $20 billion parked in funds wanting to plant trees, but it's not getting spent. For a whole bunch of reasons, I'm giving the simplest ones here. This is a really messy space. There's a lot of false claims, there's poor execution, there's low survival rates of trees, and there's fraud out there. Also, there's no reports. Imagine if you gave a company $1 million to plant trees and you didn't really know 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 15 years from now if there were any trees growing there. A great shortage of reporting on results. And on the other side of the fence, the growers themselves are all raising money from donors. They live hand to mouth. There's no standards, so you can't really differentiate one project from another as to its quality, and there's been a race to the bottom on price, and they never know what their budget is going to be from year to year, so they can't invest in expanding their operations. It's a weird paradox. Most of them have more work than they can handle, but they can't afford to grow. How's that for bizarre? What we're talking about is really a restructuring of the industry to solve these problems. There's a bunch of things we're doing. I'm going to summarize it in 2 areas. The first is we're creating a technology set that we call smart trees, smart tree forests, smart tree systems. One of the magics that we have here is on the far left, a species selection platform. You know, we don't know what grows anymore in any given place. In Minnesota, for example, I'll know it's not going to be very smart to plant a lot of ash trees anytime soon. But how about the stately cottonwood? There was an effort over the last few years to replant cottonwoods along the Mississippi. It's a near failure. They don't want to grow anymore. The ones that are full grown and they're there to stay. But only 18% of the ones that were planted new are surviving. This is true around the world. In Madagascar, there's been 10 attempts to replant forests, and Madagascar is at risk of losing its entire ecosystem. So there's a lot of effort going on there. In both Scotland and Ireland, there's efforts to reforest those areas with oaks, which were all cut down to build the British Armada. There's been 3 failures in both areas. They die. The trees that used to grow in places don't grow anymore. We have acquired technology out of Germany that allows us to take samples of the trunk, branches, and leaves of trees, run tests on them, compare those tests to soil samples and to local climate information about temperature and rainfall and stuff, what it is today and what it will be given the climate change projections, and be able to determine through tests whether the tree is going to grow or not. This is amazing technology. Think of it, today what has to happen is companies have to go and start test plots, plant things they think will grow, wait a few years and see what's still alive. After that, build big nurseries of those trees. Time they go through the whole process of planning, testing, nurseries, raising funds and stuff, you're looking at many years, 7, maybe even 10 years from an idea to trees growing. This is a really big issue, and it costs a lot of money to get through that process. We bring this technology to bear. It's a game changer. We also have brought together a series of technologies that allows us to track trees at every stage of their growth. This is easily the most sophisticated platform of its kind in the world. We are working with tech companies across the planet to put this together. I want to show you this simple map. There are, on the left side, you can see 7 different sets of technologies that are brought together in a single system. And these technologies are astonishing. From space, with a satellite, we can look down at the Earth and determine the height of a tree, how much carbon it's holding, and get this, with 90% accuracy, determine its species. It's amazing. That kind of technology doesn't come cheap, but when we build it and share it across an industry, it becomes affordable. It's the kind of thing that we're doing. So we're now able to track trees at every stage, from planning through the nurseries, the selection, everything, all the way out to a full-grown forest. And we build into our system the tracking of those trees from planting through 50 years. So that money starts to look at this and say, okay, this is making sense. And all of this is being done around a standard for the first time, an international planting and growing standards. There's a lot of standards out there for harvesting of trees, sustainable harvests, carbon offsets, things like that. Once the tree is grown, we know how to manage it. It's getting it grown that we don't know. It's me that's a lot like raising kids. There's no real manual on raising kids. Once they're grown, they get a lot easier to deal with. So we're with this coalition of partners who account for the majority of trees being grown in the world. We're putting together a standard, and it's a game changer because now we can evaluate projects against a standard, we can approve them, and we can audit against the standard. And now people who have money sit up and go, okay, now this really makes sense. It was really hard for me to give money to a project where I didn't know what I got. It was never audited, and I paid money and I don't even know if the tree's still alive. This is how we make money be smart, is through that whole smart tree system. But on top of that, we're creating a fund system that changes the way trees are paid for. Bill has had deep experience in funds, and I've had also deep experience in fund management on social impact funds. And what we've done is we've created a mutual fund system for funding the growing of trees. It makes the growing of trees have returns for people. It makes them be able to be managed over long term and allows investors to pick various aspects of trees that create assets. Different investors have different types of desires. So carbon offset credits are something that's becoming of greater value around the world. They're just beginning in the United States in California, but there's a carbon trading platform, for example, in Chicago. There are trading platforms around the world. We manage money so that people can get returns on the carbon that trees take out of the air. The trees are more amazing than that by far. We can use trees to grow fruits and nuts and still get carbon offsets and still help the climate. That's called agroforestry. And there are investors that care specifically about that space. Of course, we can produce timber rights, and especially when we're talking about developing nations, we're talking about high value timber. And in a sustainable fashion, we can use trees to do two things. Remove carbon from the air, turn it into wood, and say build things out of that wood and let the trees grow again. So we're multiplying the amount of carbon that comes out. And that is really a wonderful outcome. Water. Trees produce water. We think of trees as soaking up water, and when we plant a seedling, we water it. But if you look at what trees do to the earth, they create water as a whole. The big jungles, Amazon and the Congo, actually generate their own weather. They create so much water on the planet. It's amazing. And so water rights are a big deal in some parts of the world. Think California, which suffers from droughts and shortages of water all the time. This is true in Australia. It's true in a lot of places. You can literally pay for planting an entire forest just off of the water it's going to produce. That's another asset that trees can produce. There are a variety of others, but those are the major ones. Doing all this through a social impact fund that allows for both donors and investors to join together to really change the world. This is also a breakthrough model. It's been used in immunization and in some other aspects as well. And so we're creating a new thing. It is a mutual fund for social impact. I want to tell you how big this market is because it's astonishing. I already told you there's $20 billion sitting on the side. The UN estimates that the world is going to spend $9 trillion on climate remediation work like this between now and 2050. Think about that. 9 trillion. This is a very big number. This is an amazing amount of money. Already all over the world, there are governments that are working on legislation to spend billions of dollars more planting billions of trees. Here's the reality. There's nobody to take the money. There's no system to manage the money. There's no system to track the money and the planting of trees. And this is who we are. We're the organization building the structure to make this stuff work. We know of no one else in the world doing it today. On the one hand, that makes us feel good because of competition. On the other hand, it should make us all feel terrified because this is desperately needed. For our first 10 years, we've built a financial model. Bill has been very active in working on this. We expect to increase the planting and growing of trees 50-fold from where it is today. With that, we would be sequestering, pulling out of the air, 180 gigatons of carbon. A gigaton is a billion tons. It's a stunningly big number, 1 billion tons. That is equal to 5 years of human emissions. We hit the number of 1.2 trillion trees. Now we're talking about decades of human emissions. And that's what we're chasing between now and 2050. We show good returns on our company, but I should point out that we're a special organization. We're what's known as a benefit corporation, a B Corp. We are a cross between a nonprofit and a for-profit. So we're able to raise investor money, but we're also able to dedicate a portion of our profits. In our bylaws, we call for half of it to benefit humanity, to do the good mission we're chasing. On top of all of this, Every time you plant trees, you have local impact, significant local impact. So that's our impact there. I promised you a quick review of our team. This is our senior team. There's 10 of us working today for free, full time on this project. It's a big deal. There are about half of them that aren't working full time. Let me correct that, because they're supporting themselves by working part time on other things. You saw in the memo you got from Rusty the fact that we have multiple PhDs, multiple executives. A couple of us have managed billions of dollars in our life. Hold on for a second. Oh, sorry, my battery said it was going to die. Fix that. 5 of us have done startups. This is an astonishing team. I've never been a part of nor seen any startup team at this level. Anyone on this page, everyone on this page has been a CEO and could run this company. It's a really remarkable team. We've done this before in the world. You'll recall the American Dust Bowl from the 30s. What happened is we cut down all the trees. When you do that, you create the conditions for a desert. All you have to do to turn it into desert is practice a little bit of sloppy agriculture. This is happening all over the world, by the way, even in the US. Right now, 75% of the soil in the world is depleted. This is a big, big problem. But you do that, you deplete the soil and you cut down the trees, what you get is a desert. You add a little bit of a dry spell and you have a dust bowl. It's exactly what happens. We used to think the dust bowl was caused by a terrible drought. The reality is the drought was caused by what we did to the land. We fixed it by creating the Civilian Conservation Corps that planted 3 billion trees and taught farmers how to take care of their land. It can be done. We can fix the world. If we hadn't done this in the 30s, the center part of the US would be a desert today. That's how dire this is. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're picturing our relationship to Hastings. Any one of that team that you saw could be the CEO, and if that was the case, if it wasn't me, we wouldn't be talking about Hastings. It's because this is my hometown and because I see that it can fit what we're trying to achieve. So we would like to locate our world headquarters here. By the way, we already have staff in cities around the world. We will be opening offices in Europe immediately, as an example. So this, when we say world headquarters, we're literally meaning that. We have operations around the world at the outset. We plan on putting around 200 employees here. We used to think it was going to have to be much more, but COVID has changed the way we all do business via Zoom and less in person. And so that's really reduced the number of employees we planned on having here. Rusty can attest to that. We used to be thinking about something above 600, but we don't think that's the case anymore. Within 10 years, we expect to have more than 1,000 employees around the world, just to give some context to that. Rusty was so kind to show us available sites around the city. We've looked at a lot of them and considered them, and this is the one we prefer. The reasons are really simple. We like the proximity to highways. You're seconds from being on 61 and a freeway connecting to the cities. We like the restaurants, the river views, the walking trails. We like that confluence is there. This is going to be really important to us. The meeting space there for larger meetings, the hotel space for visitors. We expect to receive a lot of visitors, being an organization that is really this sitting behind the structure of an industry. We're bringing visitors from around the world, a new market for downtown businesses. We like the confluence there, as I mentioned already. We think we're going to attract a lot of other businesses to Hastings. We already see related businesses that we're interested in starting ourselves or helping to fund. For example, we're collecting the names of tree growing organizations across the planet. And we will be starting an association that works with them and does newsletters and creates events for them and helps to publish best practices, etc. We're working on creating a leasing company that would lease equipment to growers. Right now, they have no way to afford the tractors and trucks and such that they need to go to really big scale. So there's those and a number of other businesses. It's the nature of industry that when you get an anchor organization, it attracts the related businesses who want to locate nearby. This is going to increase the demand for housing. We would like Hastings to become a leading so-called green city. This is an important issue as you attract businesses in that are green businesses and focus on that part of the economy. By the way, I should point out, this is probably the fastest growing segment of the economy today. Everything related to making the world green again, not a shrinking part, and it has continued to do well through COVID. And we see a bigger tax base from the businesses. And by the way, as you become a green city, lots that are treed are assessed at a 11% higher rate on average than lots that aren't. Finally, green cities lead to happy people. Joy, people and culture person, would love to tell you 100 stories about this, but studies prove it. If you're stressed, go spend some time in a forest and it's going to take away a lot of your stress. It leads to a happier, more stable group of people. And by the way, trees lower energy bills through their shade. So we're bringing all of that. Here's what we're looking for. Basically, we're looking for time so that we and the city can evaluate how well we can fit together, how good this lot can work for both of us, how we can mitigate the rail noise, what we can do about parking, are there options for the power line that's over that? Basically, take the time to sort out what's going on with this specific lot. And at the same time, we're going to complete our fundraising effort, which is going well overall. We're getting really a lot of interest, and we're in the midst of conversations with investors from around the world. That's what we're asking for, is time from the city to sort this out. And there's our punchline. Trees connect the earth to the sky. We're going to help people hug their trees. That's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
I do. Hi, thank you, Mr. Menard. That was amazing. And if you could take on a class at the high school or local college as well, that would be most appreciated, because that was thoroughly enjoyable and an amazing presentation. When you're talking about replanting, are you taking into consideration privately owned places that may or may not have a lot of staying power? I mean, I know there were concerns with the Amazon forest and deforestation years and decades ago, and governmental entities that may impede progress in what you're talking about.
Yes, a very good question, and it is a necessity. And so the standards that we're working on are different from standards I've ever seen. Often there's a talk about you need to be nice to indigenous people, but there's no real teeth in that. And Joy and I both have longstanding experience in developing nations. I spent 8 years living on the ground in Africa in villages in a bunch of different countries. And unless you know how the trees are intrinsically part of the life of local people and why they want them to succeed and show them that, then they just cut them down again. And so part of of the standards are to solve exactly those kinds of problems. In the United States, we're very interested in Native people reservations. In Minnesota, the Red Lake group, for example, they have 600,000 acres. Most of it is been deforested. A lot of it is depleted land, and they control it, and they can keep it controlled. And those kinds of large areas are available around the world. Because we're chasing big numbers, we're going to be most interested in big places at the beginning. But we're also looking at partnerships with other organizations that are working at the small scale stuff. And so we can be a feeder to them of funds and technology and things like that. Questions?
Your hand, and I'll call on anyone if anyone has questions for follow-up or, Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you, Chair. Ray, you asked for time. How much time are you looking for with the city?
Between a year and a half and 2 years. And it has to do with, we are doing fundraising right now. That's our priority. That is probably around a 6-month process to complete. It could easily stretch into the first quarter of next year, but we hope to complete it before the end of the year. We'll see. It doesn't matter if people have a strong interest in investing in you. You still have to get through the whole legal and due diligence, and that by itself burns 3 months. And so part of our time frame includes thinking through that. And we're looking for really great investors, if that makes sense. We only want a few, and we want them to be people that aren't just here for the money, but also are interested in supporting us long term, and the kind of people we'd want on our board. And so we're kind of picky, if it makes sense, when it comes to our money.
Thank you.
Follow-up questions or other comments from our guests this evening? Mr. Balsanic, make sure you unmute, please.
Thank you, Madam President. You said that Hastings is your #1 choice. Have you had any other #1 choices before you came to us? Have you looked at other areas of the country to do the same thing before you came to us?
No, I would love to be able to walk to work. It would be wonderful. I've spent a lot of my time commuting to faraway places, and even a commute to the other side of Minneapolis is no fun, if you ask me. And so this is our #1 choice. I guess #2 would be like downtown St. Paul or downtown Minneapolis or something like that, maybe Bloomington. I'm going to have to answer to a board that's going to make me prove that this is a reasonable choice, if that makes sense. But I love Hastings, and I think you've got a great start on being a green city. You've got a hydroelectric plant. You've got a lot of parks and walking trails. It's a fairly treed city as it is. It's got a lot of lakes, and I think it would be an amazing thing to have an organization like ours sitting on the banks of the river with that kind of a view and a forest across the river from us. That's just, to me, that's kind of the experience I'd want for a company like ours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Unless there's any other hands raised or the question.
I'd like to end this by saying that in all the years I've been working in economic development, I've not seen anything like this happen before. Most of the time, you're responding to site selector requests for proposals for somebody that wants to locate a global headquarters. And I've had plenty of opportunity over the last 11 months now to think this is just too good to be true. And it continues to be here to be an opportunity for us. And I'm really appreciative to Spades that they're going to give us an opportunity to show why we should be the headquarters and ultimately partner with them and hopefully realize the benefits that will come with it.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to respond to that. Bill, who is with me as a CFO who has managed lots of billions, both as a CFO and as a controller on a global scale. And for us to attract a guy of his caliber who is, he likes to call himself, and I'll do it affectionately, a corporate weenie. He's a money guy. And he's worked for Blackstone, one of the biggest investment firms on the planet, and he's evaluated investments at scale, right? And he's done startups. And for us to attract a guy like that says something about the credibility of our organization. But Bill, if you would just take a minute or two and say why you think it's credible, I'd be appreciative.
Thank you, Ray, and that's kind of an embarrassing opening. I appreciate it very much. It's kind of a unique situation where the research and knowledge we have relative to raising capital. It's not a tech startup. It's not a hotel build. It's a massive project that's been extremely well researched, and it is also a collaborative effort, not only with the coalition. But we are linking technologies that exist as opposed to building new ones. Being a financial person of big scale, kind of the best of breed and the integration process. So some of very core principles are being I've seen here as I went through my diligence process, including kind of a core focus on trees, but with those derivative benefits of agroforestry, the people, and then you can intertwine those and change them in focus and make the trees the derivative. It's just enormously impactful, and it's not creating. It's circulating or expanding. If you listen closely to Ray, we're gathering people who've done it, and we're facilitating with technology and capital something that is already happening and then even needs to happen. We don't have to create a market. We don't have to create a project. We need, I'm a broken down old corporate weenie auditor. When Ray says I want standards and processes and reports, what could I say, right? I've kind of lived in my career, done that. He's made my function important and may have an impact, will have an impact in the world here. And that's why I've joined Spades and I'm glad I did.
Thank you. With our coalition partners, I should mention, we're putting together 3 projects, each of which is the biggest on the planet. There's for planting trees right now. $1 projects right now. This is in process as we speak. One of the partners on that list is a company called AFGRI, the largest agricultural and food company in Africa. We're going to be doing agroforestry projects with them. The 3 sets of projects that we're looking at are going to span more than 4 dozen nations. It's astonishing to think about this kind of scale. A gentleman who's looking to join our board right now, an investor out of Ireland, whose investment firm has invested in 1,000 tech startups. 1,000. Think of that. On Monday told me we are a $1 billion startup. It's a crazy thing to say out loud. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I leave you to your, another question?
We do have 2 additional questions.
Okay.
If we can be brief for those, I think Mr. Balsanic had his hand raised first, and we'll get to Mr. Gobler. Thank you.
Yes, Ray, I'm wondering, you had said in your presentation that you're sure that what you're doing will attract correct me if I'm wrong, you said another couple of hundred businesses to the area, or just more businesses to the area?
I have no number for you, just more.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on how many people want to come here, how friendly it is to them, etc.
What kinds of businesses would that entail?
I think that we're primarily a tech company and a money company. Think of us as a massive financial institution that's not a bank at all. I think it would attract people in those related spaces at the top of the list. Hence, I gave you the example of a leasing company that leases equipment. That's a great fit.
Do you see something advantageous in perhaps creating an incubator type business park for these new companies that would be coming in, so that they can all be within reach of each other, and can share ideas, share technology, so on and so forth? Or is it just going to be, a business that's going to go on the south end of town and one on the west side of town and things like that?
I think that's a wonderful idea. In fact, it would be helpful to us. Let me just say it. While we're building a building, if we got 25 employees, where do I put them? I don't know in Hastings a spot to park them. It's one of the challenges we face with this location, is that there's really not a lot of options on that front. There is something worth noting, though, about Hastings that maybe hasn't jumped to the front of your mind. We have fiber optic service coming through that bridge that gives us high-speed internet connectivity. That's a big deal for a tech company. One of those hidden assets that's sitting there. We couldn't locate here if you didn't have that.
I'm on our utilities committee of the city council, and we just had a meeting Monday and talked about that very thing, and also how we could lay in more cable to make it more attractive to businesses like yours. So I've been preaching for an incubator business park for quite a few years now. Of course, you can't just go and lay in the streets and all the utilities and so forth if you don't have any companies coming in. But if we're seeing that kind of interest, I think we could do something to create a special area where one company could just cross the street to talk to another one, share the same labs, et cetera, et cetera. One last question. Said I know where that 200 came from. It was 200 employees you would talk
Yes.
about approximately. What kinds of employees, what would be their expertise? Are we talking PhDs? Are we talking entry level? Are we talking livable wage? What's going to be the makeup of your employees?
We have an internal pledge that we will not pay anybody less than $15 an hour, even if they're in the field with a shovel planting trees. We really believe in a livable wage. So that's not who we see being here, because this isn't the location of the planting of a million tree project. We see every project as being bigger than a million trees, just to make sense of that. Although we probably participate in something for Hastings that was smaller. There's space in Hastings for at least 200,000 trees, just to say it. So the people, though, that would be employed, various executives, yes, PhDs, because we expect to have quite an environmental staff. Some of those people located elsewhere, some of them here. A lot of marketing people, a lot of accounting people and some tech people. There's a lot of audits and accounting that get associated with this work. We'll have those kind of people around the world, but we'll also have a lot of them here. The number of auditors or field visitors, whatever you want to call them, is kind of shockingly large by year 10. It becomes the biggest category of employee.
Do you see any research going on between your company and the University of Minnesota, for example, or UMD, or any, or Madison, across the river into Wisconsin?
Yes, right now we're in conversations with labs in Switzerland and Germany on specific subjects. The University of Minnesota is still stuck in let me call it industrial forestry, which is not the biodiverse kind of stuff we're talking about. But as climate change progresses and this kind of work grows, I would expect they're going to become a lot more interested. UMD has some interesting things going on, though, especially related to tribal lands. They're a potential resource for sure.
Right. And I, based on your presentation, just a final comment, this is, you're talking about wildfires all over the world. I see your company as a business wildfire. This is going to really take off in the next 25 to 50 years. It is truly exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Ray.
By the way, because trees generate water, they're actually how you put out those fires. California's problem is they cut down all the trees between LA and San Francisco. It used to be a redwood forest, now it's just dry grassland. They're on fire. You don't fix that problem by going up into the mountains where the fires were and replanting them. You fix by starting at the coast. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Mr. Gobler, she had a follow-up question as well. We'll take that.
Yeah, I just want to, you talked about fundraising and goals with what you have, and you mentioned you're kind of $1 billion company already, but just out of curiosity, what is your goal in that next 6 months of fundraising to make this property work for you or make it happen?
Wow, what a great question. So when we're raising two kinds of money. One is to plant trees. That's in the funds that we talked about, those mutual funds. And the other is to build our company. If we raised enough mutual funds, we wouldn't need any equity to start our company. We would still go get it because we want, as I said, that perfect investor that can connect us around the world and help us. So we would still get that equity money, but we wouldn't need as much of it. Therefore, there is a trade-off in how much money we raise on each side. And our team is already meeting with global brands around the world, with people like BP. I don't know if you've noticed, but British Petroleum has got a big effort going now to turn themselves into a green company. They're making huge pledges. Unilever, really, corporate entities around the world are meeting with us on this subject today. This is happening. So it depends on how much money we raise there as to how much money we need in equity. That's the long answer. The short answer is it can be divided out, and we're trying to put together about $10 million right now, which for a startup first round is a stunning number.
Anything else? Thank you very much, Mr. Menard.
Thank you all. I suspect we should retire and let you continue your conversation.
Yes, thank you so very much. If you, hopefully you've given the folks over at the city your contact information. It'd be great to inquire more about that. And thank you all so very much.
And in the presentation Rusty will forward, you will find my email. Feel free to send me questions personally, and we're at your disposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Good night, all.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Mr. Keneally, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Appreciate it very much.
Ms. Suzuka.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, then, that was wonderful. I feel inspired. everybody learned a lot too. That was seriously like a college course. It was great. Okay. Do we have any discussion on that, or are we just going to kind of let it sit? It was kind of lengthy and we had a lot of conversation and questions about it, but if anyone has any follow-up to cite right now, otherwise we'll move on.
Chair, if I might, if you would be interested, an action that would be helpful, I think, to take is the one that's still outlined in the memorandum, is to authorize staff to negotiate a preliminary development agreement to bring back to you. All that is would be the outline of aids will do during the time of we're willing to give them an option, and importantly what we will do, because they will have some expectations of things that we will do, including the environmental remediation of that site. If that's something that would be helpful if you're willing to consider. If not, we'll bring it up in July.
And along with that, if I can add a little bit to it, yeah, I think that would be helpful, as Rusty had said. What it wouldn't do is preclude the consideration of other offers too. So we'd be in a position, we have a letter of interest from Mint Development, which goes over some terms. With this preliminary development agreement, we'd have something somewhat similar that we could review, and then that could be the path for making a decision one way or the other. So in the fact of drafting this agreement does not mean that we're committing to it. It means that we're establishing what the terms might be to consider a commitment.
So if we have that motion before us tonight, to go ahead with drafting an agreement, to consider, even though there is another potential business out there, I would like to entertain a motion to carry that forward. Mr. Piney has motioned for that. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Balsanic. All those in favor, Mr. Hinsman, would you? Mr. Vaughn?
Yep, I want to ask staff real quick, thank you. Knowing that we asked the timeline of what they were thinking and having the other developers show an interest in this, I just don't want to be wasting your labor time too. Should we just wait and hear the other proposal and then start to direct staff on where to head to, versus if we go down this and then realize I just don't know how much labor time it'll take to work up a development plan, if we should just hear the other one knowing it's showing an interest before we spend that. That's my only concern on the motion.
Commissioner Vaughn, as I've thought about it over the course of the afternoon about trying to compare the two, I think as John said, you've got a letter of intent and a proposal to do something specific from Mint Development. I think a preliminary development agreement will not take a tremendous amount of time and will give you a comparable set of terms to understand what the relationship with Spades might be. And I will say that while Mr. Menard said that it would be 1.5 to 2 years, I think in reality, we will know far sooner that the site is not suitable. And I think that's what's important to us is if it doesn't work, relationship and being able to move on to something else. I think that the 1.5 to 2 years, what he was referring to, is when they'd be ready to start building. So I think it'll be important to clarify those time parameters in a preliminary development agreement.
Follow up, Your Honor.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Fifield. With that being said, and we have two motions, or a first and a second, we'll take a roll call vote on this.
Okay, Commissioner Piney. Okay, I think from Mr. Piney, Commissioner Balsanic.
Yes.
Bush.
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn. Commissioner Fox. And President Sullivan.
Yes.
Okay, I will indicate I have 6 ayes on that, and we will proceed in drafting that agreement. I think the intent moving forward here is this, and I just want to make sure that I'm on the same track as the commission here. We'll prepare that agreement so that we have some comparable something comparable to review in association with the Minton Development Letter of Intent. And our plan at this point, unless you feel differently, would be to have the letter of intent by Minton Development on the next meeting in July. We'd be able to have a presentation by Mr. Bars, an opportunity for questions on that. And then we would have 2 devices there that we'd be able to review and make a decision on. So if that's an appropriate way to move forward, we would do that. If there's any questions or other direction, we'd like to hear that as well.
Fine.
Thank you, Chair. John, thank you for that. And yes, I would ask for Mint to do a presentation at the next meeting, but also if we can have our data up to speed on what is our inventory of housing, or at least a ballpark, especially with the proposed housing. I'd be curious what we're looking like for inventory at that time.
Thank you.
I believe we have another item within this agenda item or subject matter. Is that correct? I'm just trying to get back to my agenda here. Okay, strategic plan for economic development update.
That would be me. We've been talking about the strategic plan for the last couple of months, put together a framework for that and put it in your packet. And I briefly want to run through it, get your input so that we can put together a draft of the plan that you can start actually talking about at the next meeting. So John, am I able to share my screen?
Make that possible here. Hold on. Should be able to now, Rusty.
All righty. Oh, this works correctly. Can you see then?
Yep, looks like it's working.
Okay, so
yeah, it's working. It did work.
Good.
Out.
Something blew up. Good. Business?
Don't see it yet.
Screen share again.
I think we've got it. All set, Rusty.
Let's see. Got it? Obviously, if to negotiate a preliminary development agreement with Spades becomes an awfully big issue in our strategic plan for 2020-21. I would see that breaking down from an economic development perspective to the actual development of the site, the timeline for construction and jobs coming on. What does it mean to go through the steps that Mr. Menard talked about in becoming a green city, and then having a far better understanding of the spin-off benefit we get from visitors and other development coming to Hastings. That's a lot to try and get your arms around, but that certainly would be a focal point of economic development activity in the coming year should we proceed with Spades. The rest of what we've talked about traditionally in the strategic plan doesn't go away, and in fact, housing probably becomes more important to try and get to where Commissioner Vaughn was going. The inventory of housing, should we have this influx of new employees, where are we going to put them? But it also relates to all the other issues that we've been talking about over the last year: life cycle housing, creating new construction, taking care of the existing housing stock. We were dealing with housing earlier this year until the pandemic took it off the tracks. One of the things that we need to do is prioritize issues. There's more housing issues facing us than we really have the capacity to deal with. Determine who's going to do what, because right now housing is a bit of an orphan as it comes to economic development issues, and then to come up with a concrete set of next steps. I will tell you that yesterday the county's housing needs assessment was finally released, and I've not yet gone through it, but we'll have a summary of the issues in it for our next meeting that will obviously influence this issue of housing. Development is clearly an important issue, both for Vermilion Street and for downtown as being the two primary areas for. And with that, as I was trying to figure out what would be good strategy for Vermilion Street, two things came to my mind. One is the Vermilion Street corridor study has a detailed action matrix of things to do to implement that plan that really has not been given a lot of attention. And I would propose to bring that out and use that as a way of focusing work that we will do. Importantly, though, in the coming year, MnDOT is poised to start requesting proposals and then to undertake a corridor study of Highway 61 through, and that study will have a great opportunity to make sure that the improvements that they make to Highway 61 are compatible with our development opportunities, and also that we understand the improvements. So to the degree that the improvements to Highway 61 impair development opportunities, we're aware that that improvement is going to be taking place. In the downtown, critical to get the confluence up and running and open, to understand how Spades helps that and the rest of downtown, and then to continue to deal with the unexpected of COVID-19, because we certainly can't sit here today on the 11th of June and know what that's going to mean in 2021. I would propose in the update of the strategic plan is that from a broad economic development perspective, we focus on business development, and that is growing the small businesses that we have here. As we have seen in the pandemic, both good and bad, it's the heart and soul of the business community here. It's not solely our responsibility to do that, so it would be a lot of collaboration, but it would mean understanding what does it mean to help foster local business development and growth in Hastings, to figure out the roles that we would play and then to create programs around that. Those are the four areas that I would suggest be the foundation of the strategic plan, and that's an ambitious set of things to do, and that's the end of my comments, and I would be interested in feedback from the commissioners.
I think that is a great summary. I like the layout of how it all fits together, and I'm really excited about new proposals coming forth and just creative ideas. So, any comments from the group? Well, I'll just call on you as you raise your hand, as usual. Mr. Goldberg.
Just the housing piece, I think, is extremely important that we get that going again. We're very fortunate to have someone approaching us like Spades to put a business here, such as that where they're going to have 200 jobs. But a lot of times people will look at that and say, well, our housing growth hasn't been growing, so therefore, why should we even try there? So I think it's important that we start seeing new housing starts and start getting us going in that direction, so that, it's great that we have this opportunity, but it'll give other opportunities as well. So it all works together. So I'm glad we have that part of our initiative and we're working towards that.
Any action? Oh, yes, Mr. Piney.
I just want to chime in on the importance of the housing aspect of this. I think we very clearly will have a market of folks coming in that are going to be looking for something different, something unique, something sustainable. This is really an opportunity for us even to glean information off of them as far as what would their employees be looking at, as far as housing, what would they desire, what would their needs be, because this is a demographic that I think overall we would love to have in Hastings. They're tied into technology. It's a youthful outlook. Yeah, anything that we can do to jumpstart our efforts and even work in a parallel fashion with what the needs of these folks will be as we fashion what our response will be to it. That's what my 2 cents is here.
Thank you, Mr. Fe-
That's a great point, and it dovetails nicely into a piece of upcoming business for the board, and that is the downtown property study. That's kind of been running along parallel to other things that have been going on, but it's now to the point that it will be coming forward for your consideration. The preliminary findings of it have been encouraged from and thinking about how it coincides with Spades is the property that we have downtown, in addition to Block 1, is well suited to different housing styles, and it because we own them does create the opportunity to collaborate with Spades and be creative on how that gets used for housing that would benefit the community and would help them provide attractive housing for their employees.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Hinsman, is there any action required on this? Just a update, so to speak?
That is correct. No action required tonight. We're just checking in.
Thank you. So business community updates and vacancies, et cetera. Mr. Hinsman, are you handling this?
Absolutely. I'll run through a quick summary here.
Okay.
The commercial vacancy, we've had a few changes in the downtown. Beloved Boutique moved down the street. Impressive Windows has moved into their space from another space downtown. So a few iterations there. United Promotions, their building is for sale. They are presumably moving into the Kateria Schmidt property, which they got approval from a month or two ago. One thing I did wanted to provide an update to the commission on is some of the activities that have been happening related to COVID business flexibility that have been before the council over the last few meetings. In May, we were approached by the Downtown Business Association with a list of requests to help downtown businesses, and we were able to take action on a lot of those. Some of those you've probably seen as you go through the downtown area. We've kind of created a unique system in which restaurants and some retail areas were able to expand beyond their confines and their sidewalk cafes into the street. So you'll see some traffic cones and some delineations that were put in there so that would allow table expansion places in there. And that was directly in response to a request from the DBA to provide that additional space given the restrictions that restaurants have been under since the COVID pandemic began. So that's something we've done. We put down additional bathroom facilities underneath the bridge and enhanced the space underneath the bridge by providing around 8 picnic tables down there. So people have more spots to go. We've been able to document and put on our social media all the places that we have within the downtown area that people can use to eat, which is great. And we've been able to work with them on with the hard grant monies to do some of the other expansion projects as well. When we last met with HEDRA, we had a proposal before us on the parklet concept on it. And so you may be going, well, we looked at a parklet concept, and what we have out there right now is a little bit different, which it is. We were left with a conundrum in which under state law, you have to have your liquor service be what's termed contiguous to the main property. And the sidewalk area provided a separation. And so we had to think of something different. And so what we ended up doing is instead of having the sidewalk come between the building and the seating, we had the sidewalk go around it. So we could create contiguous spaces down there. And so the funding that we had allocated in HEDRA towards the parklet construction, we allocated towards some of the measures that were used to create those enhanced restaurant areas with the fence and the traffic demarcation devices that are down there. So that's what we ended up doing with the parklet funds on that one. Another item that we just recently approved at a special meeting on Tuesday was the weekend closure of 2nd Street as we go through the downtown area. So 2nd Street between the off ramps of Highway 61, so right by the Fireside and the Lock and Dam to Sibley Street. So that 1 block area, that'll be barricaded closed from Friday morning until Monday morning. I think beginning as early as this weekend through the fall. And that is to provide additional space for patrons, restaurants of the downtown area to spread out. And so that'll be something that you'll be seeing here in short measure. We're working to put that together as quickly as possible with the response on that one. We did have a response. We did have a request from the Downtown Business Association to expand liquor service areas to have liquor be able to be consumed within the downtown streets in a limited area. We had a lot of discussion on that. Ultimately, we decided not to do that. So the liquor laws remain the same as we move forward. And we also have had expanded areas within private facilities as well. We've had situations in which restaurants that have parking lots sought to have additional table space. We created a measure in which these individual restaurants could close off a portion of their parking and then expand into them. And I think at this point, we've had 8 approvals for restaurants for that fashion. For the parklet proposal downtown and the expanded restaurant space, I think there's been another 8 there. We've got another 4, I think, coming before council again this Monday. So we've been working a lot with restaurants over the last few weeks to make sure that they can operate under the law at the greatest capacity that they can. And so those are some of the things that we've been working on the COVID aspect of it. And I'm not sure if you have any questions related to that.
Commissioners, any follow-up questions for Mr. Hinsman on that regard?
And then on a couple of development updates, as we're speaking right now, there is another Zoom meeting being held with Epcon Development and the neighbors of Northridge and Pleasant Drive. They are proposing a 33-unit detached senior housing villa type housing. So what it is individually detached townhomes marketed towards senior. This is a company based in Ohio, and this is what they do exclusively. They have developments like this throughout the country. This is their first foray into Minnesota. Our planning committee of council was able to review some of the plans, and it's a pretty innovative development for the site. And I think it would be a really good market for Hastings. So we're holding that neighborhood meeting tonight to get feedback and to introduce the neighbors to the project. And we expect that to be coming forward in short measure here for approvals on that. So the projects that we've had in the ground or we've had under development here still continue to move forward with the 2 senior projects, with the annexation, with this development. So hopefully those will translate into building lots shortly, and we'll be able to increase our capacity. And I think that's about all I had.
Anything else for the good of the order? Comments, questions? I think it was a great meeting. So it's 7:29, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn.
I'll second.
Mr. Goldberg, thank you. So I'm guessing all of us are in favor of that, and we shall adjourn at now 7:29, and I will talk to you all next month, if not sooner, now that we have downtown open and everyone's outside.
Right. Thank you.
So,